What would you do if the person you trusted most looked you in the eye and told you, "He's just a neighbor," but then days later you slid open your sock drawer and felt two cool metal rings pressed together under a pile of folded cotton? That's what happened to me, and the way my stomach dropped in that moment is hard to put into words. I'm not someone who cries easily, but I swear my eyes stung like I'd been hit with pepper spray. I pulled them out slowly, holding them up under the light, and for a moment I thought my brain was playing tricks on me. Matching rings. Not one but two. Shiny, deliberate, unmistakably paired. They weren't mine, and they weren't hers either. At least, not in the way they were supposed to be. The memory of her brushing me off with that calm, almost dismissive smile. "You're being paranoid, he's just a neighbor," echoed in my head, taunting me. And yet here was solid proof, glinting in my hand, laughing at me louder than any argument ever could. I wish I could tell you that was the only time I felt that gut punch of betrayal. But the truth is, this discovery wasn't just about jewelry. It was a whole unraveling, a thread that once tugged, pulled apart the fabric of everything I thought was solid in my life. I'm telling you this not just to vent, but because I think a lot of us live in these strange grey spaces where we want to believe people, where we cling to explanations that don't make sense because the alternative that the person you've built a life with is lying, is too terrifying. But sometimes the universe has a way of slapping the truth into your hands. For me, that slap came in the form of those rings, cold and weighty against my palm, heavier than gold has any right to be. Now let me back up for a second. Our neighbor wasn't even technically next door. He lived 2 houses down, the kind of guy you wave at when you're bringing the bins in, or when you're both awkwardly standing by your mailbox at the same time. Average guy. Average job. No obvious red flag. He had this easy laugh, and I'll admit he was friendly enough that when my wife said she sometimes chatted with him when she was out walking the dog, I didn't think twice. Why would I? We're all supposed to be friendly with neighbors, right? But then there were little things. You know the kind I mean. The small details that on their own are nothing but when strung together, start to look like blinking warning lights. Like how she suddenly started dressing up to walk the dog. How she lingered on the front porch, phone in hand, pretending to scroll while sneaking glances down the street. How I'd hear her laugh from the kitchen, not the kind of laugh you give your husband when he makes a corny joke, but a light, almost nervous giggle. I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself marriage requires trust. But the human brain has this cruel way of storing suspicions in the back of your mind, like files waiting to be opened. And when you finally do, every detail you ignored floods out, demanding to be re-examined. The rings were the file folder bursting open. I didn't confront her right away. Maybe that surprises you, but I wanted to be sure. If you've ever been in this position, you'll understand. Once you accuse, you can't take it back. You risk being painted as insecure, jealous, controlling. I'd seen friends fall into that trap, coming off like the bad guy, even when they were the one being betrayed. So instead, I played it cool. I slid the rings back exactly where I found them, careful not to disturb a single sock, and I waited. The waiting was torture. Every day that passed, I caught myself watching her with a kind of detached fascination, like I was studying a stranger in my own home. Was she texting him at the dinner table? Was that why she smiled at her phone? Did she take longer in the shower because she was sending him pictures? My brain spun with scenarios, some ridiculous, some horribly plausible. I even started imagining what they might have said to each other while slipping those rings on their fingers for the first time. Was it a joke, a promise, something they swore meant nothing, or something they knew meant everything? Then came the evening that turned suspicion into certainty. She said she was running to the store, a quick trip, but something in her tone was off, almost rehearsed. So I followed, not in some movie-style tail her down the street way, but quietly, in my car, headlights off, until she turned out of the neighborhood. She didn't go to the store. She parked near the small park at the end of our block, the one with the old swing set that creaks when the wind picks up. And who was already waiting there? Our neighbor. I stayed back, hidden in the dark, heart hammering so loud I was sure it could be heard. They didn't kiss. Not right away, at least. They just stood there, talking too close for two people who claimed to be nothing more than friendly. And then she reached into her purse and pulled something out. Even from a distance, I knew what it was. One of those rings. She slipped it on his finger, laughing nervously. He kissed her hand. That's when the world tilted. You ever feel your chest cave in, like the air around you just disappeared? That was me, in my car, staring at the people I thought I knew playing out a scene I never wanted to see. But here's where things get complicated, because instead of marching over there, instead of exploding in rage like every movie husband does, I sat still, I watched, and I realized I had a choice: storm in and make a scene, or hold my silence and gather proof. I chose the latter, and that's when I started documenting everything. Photos, times, screenshots, conversations I pretended not to hear, a digital trail of betrayal. It was sickening, but it gave me a strange kind of power, like I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was building a case. I know some of you might be thinking, why not just leave? Why not confront her right away? Believe me, those thoughts tortured me too. But leaving without understanding, without knowing the full extent, felt like walking out of a burning house, without checking if anyone else was inside. I needed to see how deep the fire went. The deeper I looked, the worse it got. Those rings weren't just a secret. They were a symbol, a bond, something they wore when they thought I wasn't looking, something they kept hidden in my own home as if mocking me. And every time I opened that sock drawer after, I felt like it was staring back at me, daring me to act. And oh, I did act, but not the way either of them expected. I'll never forget the moment I decided that silence was no longer an option. The rings were still in that sock drawer, waiting for me like cursed relics, and I realized that by leaving them there I was letting them win. Every morning when I got dressed for work, brushing against that drawer, I felt the weight of their secret pressing into me. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was a spectator in my own marriage, watching my life unfold like a play where I hadn't even been given the script. But here's the thing. Rage is easy. Anyone can explode, shout, demand answers. That's the shortcut. What's harder, what's sharper, is patient planning. Knowing that when you finally move, it won't just be a scream in the dark. It'll be a strike so calculated that the people who underestimated you will never see it coming. That's where my head went, and once I crossed that mental line, there was no turning back. I started small, a camera in the living room disguised as a smoke detector, a recorder tucked into the side of the couch. I wasn't proud of it, but pride didn't matter anymore. Truth did. Every evening she came home later than usual. I marked it down. Every time her phone lit up with his name while she tried to tilt the screen away from me, I remembered. I built a timeline, a story within the story, one they thought I'd never piece together. The irony is, once you start really paying attention, you notice everything. The way she hummed while texting him, a tune she never hummed for me. The way her perfume lingered in the car after she claimed she only went for a quick drive. The way he, the so-called neighbor, suddenly stopped waving at me when I brought out the bins, as if his guilt was too heavy to carry in daylight. And then there were the rings again. I checked that drawer every day, like a man obsessed, and sometimes they weren't there, sometimes she took them. I knew because the little dip in the socks wasn't the same. It was like a hole in the earth had shifted slightly under my feet. She brought them back later, like some twisted ritual, thinking I was too blind to notice. But I noticed everything. One night I decided to test her. I asked her casually if she wanted to go for dinner that weekend. She hesitated just a fraction too long before agreeing. That hesitation told me everything. So I booked the dinner at a fancy place downtown, knowing she'd have to come up with an excuse to him. And sure enough, while she got ready, her phone buzzed and she slipped into the bathroom to answer it. I didn't even need to hear the words. I could tell by her voice, softer, warmer, almost pleading. She wasn't talking to me like that. I smiled in the mirror that night while adjusting my tie, because she thought she was ahead of me, when really I was setting the board. The breaking point came a week later. I walked into the bedroom, and there she was, sitting cross-legged on the bed, holding one of the rings between her fingers, staring at it like it was some sacred token. She didn't even hear me at first, and when he finally looked up, she scrambled, trying to hide it under the pillow like a teenager caught with contraband. That was when I decided to end the show. I didn't yell. I didn't ask questions. Instead, I walked to my closet, pulled down a folder I had been building for weeks, and dropped it on the bed beside her. Photos, screenshots, printouts of text logs I'd managed to recover. Times, date. Her hand trembled as she flipped through them, her face draining of color like ink bleeding out of paper. "Do you know what this is?" I asked calmly. She stammered something about me misunderstanding. Classic. "He's just a neighbor," replayed in my head. But now it sounded pathetic, weak. I leaned in close. My voice steady. No. This is a record of your choices. Every lie. Every secret. Every time you thought I wasn't watching. And then I pulled out the trump card. A copy of the lease. Because it wasn't just the ring. They had rented a small apartment together in the next suburb over. A place she thought I'd never discover. But I had. Thanks to a financial trail she left sloppy. It was under his name. But her signature was there too. Bold and undeniable. That's when she broke tears. Begging. The whole performance. She said it was a mistake. That it wasn't serious. That she loved me. I sat there cold. Listening. And I realized something crystal clear. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry she got caught. Here's the twist though. I didn't throw her out right then and there. That would have been too easy. Instead I let her believe we could work through it. I let her think I was willing to forgive. And in that space, while she relaxed just enough to stop covering her tracks, I prepared everything. I went to a lawyer, showed them everything, built the case airtight. We had joint accounts, property, investments. I wasn't going to let her walk away with half of what I had built, while she played house with someone else. No, if she wanted rings she could keep those. The day I finally made my move, it wasn't in the privacy of our home. No, I chose the most public setting I could. A barbecue with friends and neighbors. The kind of event where everyone brings salads in Tupperware, and kids run around with juice boxes. She was laughing, holding a plate, pretending everything was normal. And who was there lurking 2 houses down, watching him? Of course I stood up, glass in hand, and I said loudly, "I want to make a toast." Everyone quieted. She looked at me, smiling nervously, unsure of what was coming. "To honesty," I said, "the thing that keeps relationships alive, and the thing that, when broken, destroys them." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the rings, held them high for everyone to see. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She froze, eyes wide, while whispers spread like wildfire. And then, calmly, I placed the rings on the table in front of her. "You told me he was just a neighbor," I said, voice carrying across the backyard. "But I guess neighbors don't usually rent apartments together, or buy matching jewelry, do they?" Her face collapsed. The neighbor turned pale, and in that moment, I didn't feel rage. I felt power, because the truth was no longer hidden. It was out there, undeniable, witnessed by everyone. I left her there, speechless, while I walked out of that barbecue, head high. By the time she came home that night, her things were already packed, her access to our accounts revoked. The locks changed. I had spent weeks preparing, and when the time came, I executed it flawlessly. Do you want to know the strangest part? I didn't feel broken. I felt free, because the rings that once mocked me became the very proof I needed to reclaim my life. And if you're wondering what happened to them, they're still with me, not because I cherish them, but because they remind me of a lesson I'll never forget. Trust is precious, but once someone treats it like a game, you don't have to play by their rules anymore. That's my story. Not the one I ever thought I'd tell, but the one that set me free.